Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code CHAMPION and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matter more than ever. Remember to use code CHAMPION and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, and parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, Virginia only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Promotional offer not available in Washington, D.C.
You're ready for a comeback. And with Purdue Global, you can do more than take classes. You can take charge of your story, of your career, of your life. Earn a degree you can be proud of and get an education employers respect. It's time, your time, not just to go back to school, but to come back and move forward with Purdue Global, Purdue's online university for working adults. Start your comeback at purdueglobal.edu.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins.
Hello, everybody, and here we are. Another podcast, another day. But this is not just another podcast. This is a podcast celebrating punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, metal, as long as it's affiliated with small, sweaty rooms at some point and just like pulling on those DIY principles that, we all just frankly love and adore and have fixed our life towards. Today is a real special one because this is a person who I had never met before, never had a discussion, was only lightly familiar with his band. His name is Steve Jennings, and he sings for a band called Spark of Life, who is putting out a new record on New Age Records. Shout out to Mike Hartsfield and the New Age Records family over there. I freaking love that label, and I love Mike. But Spark of Life is interesting because they formed in the late 90s, early 2000s, put out a record on a subsidiary of Fat Records called Lorelei Records. And, they did some stuff and they toured and they, made an impression around that time. But then, they just kind of like life obviously gets in the way and they weren't, going out there and touring and playing shows and stuff like that. They never really broke up, but it was one of those things where they got pulled back together, circumstances changed in life, and they felt the need to be creative again. And I feel like this story is very symbolic of, I think, where many of us are in our own personal lives, whether like old, young, anytime in between, where you feel the pull to do something, whether it's, sitting down and writing a book or doing a painting or whatever. There are times where it's just like that, just overwhelming feeling of like, I need to do this. And whether or not it's like, done in a day or done in, 2 years, it doesn't necessarily matter. But I think this conversation it was inspiring to me. And I think it's inspiring to, or I hope it'll be inspiring to many of you who listen to this on a week-to-week basis. But Steve, great dude. He also worked for many, many years behind the scenes from the music industry perspective at Velvet Hammer Management, who takes care of like Deftones, System of a Down, AFI at one point. They still may take care of them, Rise Against. But that's where Steve got to start from a music industry perspective. So we have a lot of interesting conversations. Plus, he's an edge dude, an edge adult. And anytime you're an edge adult, I'm always going to be a fan of you. So Spark of Life, like I said, is going to be putting out a new record on New Age in the next, couple of months. They have some singles out that you are able to check out wherever you may stream music. And of course, I'll link it in the show notes as well. But let's talk about some ways that you can support the show for absolutely $0. First of all, you can email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. this email has been blowing up lately, and I love that. Whether it's people being like, hey, check out this band, or hey, I run a label, I'd like to send you something. I mean, who's going to say no to free stuff? But, shout out to Extinction Burst Records, who recently sent me a care package of some great stuff. And anyways, I just love to tap in where I don't know things, because clearly there's a lot of cool stuff going on that may not reach, my radar or any of the listeners' radar. So I always like to, receive that feedback over email. You can also leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page. It helps out tremendously in the algorithms, just as far as people discovering it. And the same thing could be said on Spotify. Just leave a rating there. I know like every single podcast asks you to do that, but there's a reason that we do that. It helps the visibility side of things. And like I said, it costs you nothing but time, which, is not a renewable resource, but you can take like 30 seconds out of your day, right? Anyways, let's go on the weekly recommendation bandwagon, because I've been doing this and I will continue to do this throughout the year, where I am shouting out releases, the things that I've been listening to recently, things that you should pay attention to. And I will include, as I always do, a link in the show notes to a playlist, a running playlist of all of the music that I've been digging over this particular year. Some of it may be brand new. Some of it may be older. Some of it may make it to the best of 2024 list. Who knows? But this is just stuff that I want to highlight for this particular episode and, episodes moving forward. But focusing on this week's recommendation, it is the band Knife in the Dark and the band Heavens Die. They put out a recent split on LDB Records, and I want to say Force of Reckoning. They're from North Carolina, I'm fairly certain. They put out like the tape and the CD. LDB Records is going to be doing the vinyl at some point. I'm patiently awaiting the vinyl pre-order for this. But Knife in the Dark, I freaking love. Like, they put out a 3-song demo, I want to say last year at some point. Basically just like great, like vintage late 90s metalcore a la Turmoil, and maybe a more recent comparison to band like Advent, which obviously is just sitting on the shoulders of Turmoil. But Knife in the Dark, I freaking love them. So anytime they put out new music, I'm paying attention. And Heavens Die, I'd heard of the band name, never really checked it out, but both bands complement each other very, very well. So you would be, if you are a fan of anything heavy and obviously metallic hardcore, you can literally not go wrong by checking this split out. And I love splits. Man, there needs to be more splits, whether it's bands that are, complement each other, like Knife in the Dark and Heavens Die, or whether it's bands that like sound nothing alike, but they maybe share members or whatever. I just love those vibes, and I want more splits. So there you go. I'm waving the flag for splits, and I'm also waving the flag for this particular split, Heavens Die and A Knife in the Dark. So, let's move on to the conversation with Steve Jennings from Spark of Life. And just really, like I said, cool dude, great perspective. Love to have this conversation with him. We're going to play a little bit of a song that is unreleased, has never been heard by anybody else outside the band, called Nobody Hates Me More Than Me. And it's actually not even the finished version. It's pretty close to it, but it's going to be on their upcoming Spark of Life LP that will be released by New Age Records at some point in the next 3-4 months or so. No street date has been, released as of yet. But anyways, here's Steve from Spark of Life. Spark of Life was a band that, I totally remember you guys like starting in the, correct me if I'm wrong, like the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, it started off probably a year or so, maybe in the late 99, 2000, but it wasn't a thing until the early 2000s. Roughly 2002 is about when we started really kind of taking it serious, getting out of hometown and going on tour and those types of things.
Right. Yeah. I definitely remember the band name and just like being, aware, living in the Southern California area. And it's interesting because, and by no stretch of the imagination would I want you to be offended by this, but the idea that it's like, you existed, you put out some records, you did some stuff, and then, 20 years later, you're like, hey, you know what? Like, we're a band again. And that's a wild journey. And I know there's a lot of blanks that we'll obviously fill in during this conversation.
Yeah.
Why, I guess, feel inspired to do that now? I mean, I know that you obviously reconnected with your guitarist and that kind of sparked everything, but you don't necessarily like need to be in a band, but you obviously feel very compelled to do so. So I realize it's a big question to start off with, but
yeah,
why now? Why here?
Yeah. And actually it's probably the best question. And in terms of an entry point, I would say that during the entire time that we will obviously touch back on the beginning, but after kind of taking the hiatus, we never broke up. Like that was the thing. Like we were signed, we put out a record and we toured, and then all of a sudden, like kind of life just got in the way. And I, to be honest, like I'm sure if you asked everybody would have a different idea of kind of what happened, but life just kind of took over. And but we were never not friends. Like Nick, the guitar player, is my best friend. He has been since we were in high school, and his brother plays drums, so we were always in contact, always around music. And in a weird way, and I guess we can touch on this too, because I know that you are involved in the business side of music too, but I actually moved into the business side of music. I started working in music management. And that kind of derailed a lot of the band, which ironically enough, I ended up starting a different band while I was in music management. But then I got married, and my wife got pregnant, and I just kind of, it just kind of fizzled away. And but the music and like where our heart was always in hardcore. It was always in punk rock. Like I've been in love with music and punk rock since it's my earliest memories. And at some point about 2 years ago, I invested in equipment for like a little home studio. My daughter, I had been playing guitar with her and she was singing, and I thought, oh, this would be cool to, maybe start writing some music. And I really started off as easy as that, trying to write some songs for my daughter, trying to get her into punk rock and get her into hardcore because she saw how passionate I was about it, and she heard our old records. And was always curious or asking about them, and and I wanted her to feel the same things that I felt growing up as a kid, and finding punk rock. And first and foremost, I'd like to say too that I'm a fan, like far before I'm a musician. I'm definitely a fan of music, and I just I luckied into it and stumbled into it. But after that, I called my guitar player. I wrote a song in my garage, and I called my buddy Nick, and I just said, "Hey, like, man, I wrote this song. Let's do it." And he was like, "Yeah, man, let's go record it." There was no plan. There was nothing there. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. I wondered if I even cared about it anymore. I felt like maybe I'm too old for this, or I'm, maybe it's not, in the cards anymore. And, man, the more I started writing and the more we started playing together, the whole narrative changed. And I was like, man, I really do care about this. I feel like I have a lot to say still. And I feel like there's still a fire here. It never died, but it just caught quick. And, from there, really just, got a hold of, old friends, and we kind of reestablished the band. Before you know it, we were in the studio recording. So I guess that's a quick answer.
No,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, there's a lot of threads that we can pull on in there, but I think something you said that resonates not only with me, but I imagine many of our audience too, where it's like, you don't, the path of being connected to music, like it's never, it's just always kind of there. It's like a low hum that exists beside you regardless of where you're traveling in life. And I think that sometimes you're just like swimming in it more, you know, to use a bad metaphor, like swimming in the middle of the river and like everything's going, versus like, you know, sometimes in your life, you're just kind of standing on the shore or whatever. And I think for you being able to like light that, you know, creative juice gets you back into being like, oh yes, like I don't, like you're doing the mental calculus of like, oh, I'm too old to do this, but you're just like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I just want to do it.
Yeah, it was an odd feeling, you know, like I'm sure like we'll talk about this too, but I had some friends, you know, that were in bands, and, you know, it was my birthday was coming up, and I was like, I'd like, let's get the band back. This is 5 years ago. And I was like, let's get the band back together, you know, like let's play a few songs, have our buddies band play. And it's just like a weird sort of thing. Like, yeah, and you're 100% right. It's just like bubbling just under the surface. And, man, like playing that show, it just really like re-energized the thought of like, maybe I can get out there and maybe we can do this again. You know, like I don't know to what level anymore, or if anybody's even going to care, but, it just really reignited that thing, that wanting to be creative and sit down and write songs and then go out and scream in front of people. I don't know what that is. I just know that like I've always loved watching people do it, and I'm enamored by bands and songs, and it just reignited a fire that, you know. So yeah, it's just been a really good feeling to be able to get that going again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll hit on some of that, but I wanted to walk you through like, I didn't know where you were born and raised. Like, did you come up in Southern California, or was it in the Chicago area? I was trying to trace.
Yeah, no. We were from a little town called Simi Valley. We were,
oh yes, of course.
Yeah. Like I didn't know it at the time, man, but we got lucky with, with our geographic location. I mean, we were smack in the middle of Nardcore, you know, like we were right at the, you know, the outskirts of Oxnard, and like that's my real true first exposure to punk rock and music, with my older brother bringing me a Nardcore and Mystic Records compilations at 5 and 6 years old. I grew up across the street. I'm sure maybe we're going to get into this too, but I grew up across the street from a guy named Scott Riddance. And
Pulley. Yep.
Pulley. Yeah, he's one of my brother's best friends, but we've become friends with him over the last, you know, forever. Like he used to play baseball with me in the front yard as a little kid. And if you're familiar with him at all, you know that he kind of went on to have a successful career in that business of playing professional baseball. But that was my first real exposure, and yeah, we grew up in Simi Valley, and there was just all kinds of bands and punk and hardcore that was happening all around us.
Right. No, that's awesome. I mean, that, you know, Nardcore is definitely very foundational for many people that are getting into, you know, punk and hardcore. Especially, I think that area is so interesting because it is obviously close enough to Southern California, where, I mean, it is Southern California, but like as far as, you know, LA and a stone's throw from Orange County, and, you know, even farther from San Diego, but it has its own unique identity, which is so interesting because that area is not commonly thought of by most people. Where it's like Oxnard, farms and fields. It's really,
it's it's a weird place, and let there be no doubt that Simi Valley is also a weird place. But it's just so like I said, as I look back on it, I'm so lucky really to have been there, just because the Nardcore era really is a little bit before my time. My brother is 10 years older than me. And so is Scott. But listening to Aggression and RKL and Scared Straight and Ill Repute, I love Ill Repute. Those were my first bands that, you know, I loved. And to be honest with you, I was so young that I didn't even know why I loved them. I just knew that like my older brother liked them. We're out, you know, they were all skateboarders, and, you know, it made me pick up a skateboard and really just dive into that counterculture that my brother and I could see his friends were doing, and I just latched onto it immediately. The skateboarding and punk rock was just it. And it really wasn't until about 8th or 9th grade where I finally like branched off. And that's when I discovered probably, the hardcore that resonates most with me, which would be in the mid 90s as I'm getting into junior high and high school. And that's when the floodgates, speaking of which, Floodgate is a great band, sort of opened up, and my whole world changed. I remember being in 8th grade and speaking of the 805, Thousand Oaks area. I was in 8th grade and I got handed a tape of this band called Strife, that was from Thousand Oaks. And it was One Truth. And I remember playing it for the first time, and it scared the hell out of me. The opening of Through and Through, just that feedback. And I had never heard anything like it. And we were like, who are these? And they were from Thousand Oaks. They were one town over, and they played around local all the time. So eventually, I've seen them so many times now, but it just that's when hardcore clicked for me. I'd been listening to it, but that's when it clicked. I saw pictures of them and I saw the X's on their hands, and I was like, this is it. Like I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to skateboard and listen to punk rock. So it's a unique area. And like you see, yeah, absolutely. Just so close to everything that was happening in LA and Orange County and San Diego, which all of those scenes I love. And I could talk forever about them.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I grew up in Orange County, and so Strife was a huge band for me as well in regards to just being able to, and I think something that, to your point, and honestly really leans into, what Spark of Life is as well, where musically speaking, it's like, yes, you're a hardcore band, like, you wear X's on your hands, like there's so much, connective tissue that gets pulled in. But like, I remember back in the days, and I know mixed bills were more prevalent in the 90s, but it's like, seeing Strife and Voodoo Glow Skulls play, and the same thing could be said where it's like, Spark of Life, like you guys can play with a wide variety of bands. Like, you can play with the Menzingers, and you can obviously play, with Free Will Program or whatever. And there's something special about that where it's like a kid that goes to see Voodoo Glow Skulls that has no connective tissue with like what straight edge or, hardcore is, like could watch that and be kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like I know that when I remember when we started Spark of Life, like, and everybody has these conversations, right? You're like, oh, what do you want us? We all steal from our favorite thieves. That's not my saying, but I remember somebody saying that. And I remember like talking to our guitar player, and we were talking, and we were like, we want to be, a mix between, like Snapcase meets Face to Face meets, like Jimmy World, and like what a weird thing that it was, and we weren't good enough to be any of those bands, and like, but it's a weird thing, to think, and you are correct. Like we've always fallen into this sort of soft spot where we're not hard enough to scare anybody, but we're also not soft enough that we end up playing with pop punk bands. And, we've run the gamut. We've played shows with Darkest Hour, and but we've also gone on tour with Pulley and played in more of that sort of skate pop punk arena. So yeah, somehow we cover a lot of ground. But yeah, just you're 100% correct.
Do our friends at rockabilia.com take care of you if you care about band merch? The answer is yes, because for one, they're giving me a promo code to give you 10% off of your entire order at rockabilia.com. It is 100 words or less. Type all that in the promo code bar, and you will be able to get 10% off your entire order. Basically, it's free shipping. Let's just, let's call it what it is. But they sell officially licensed band merch from bands of all shapes and sizes. Whether you're into like Kiss, Grateful Dead, Metallica, Iron Maiden, all bands of that size. And then, it goes down the rabbit hole from there where it's like, hey, maybe you want, and this is going to sound like a joke, but I swear it is not. Maybe you want a Sleep Token lava lamp. They literally have that. And again, it's officially licensed. That means the bands have sanctioned this. They get paid from it. And that is a good thing because, there's a lot of bootleg stuff that exists out there. And I'm not going to be one to say that, you shouldn't buy that because maybe I've bought a thing or two from a bootleg store, but that's neither here nor there. Rockabilia is the awesomest place. They ship from the Midwest here in the United States of America. Gets you a lickety split. You can just buy for everybody on your birthday, Easter, St. Patrick's Day list, whatever holiday is coming around the corner. You can just go ahead and do all your shopping there. Use the promo code 100 words or less, and it gets you 10% off of your entire order. Thank you very much, Rockabilia, for your continued support. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all want more time in our lives. Whether it's like, dang, I wish I had like another hour to, play video games or read more or get outside or whatever it is. I know myself that I actually get questions a lot in regards to this podcast. How do you fit it in your day? And like, how do you do the interviews and all that stuff to be able to then balance the rest of my life from my work and, playing in a band, and I have a family, all of these things. But that is why therapy is so awesome, because it helps you be able to sort out your life to focus on the things that, for one, really matter to you, and two, try to find more time for those things that you love. That is why I love working with BetterHelp, because if you need to find a therapist, they're there for you. So give them a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient for you, and they can be suited to your schedule. And you fill out a brief questionnaire, matches you up with your own personal therapist. And if you do not like that experience, you can switch it. No problem. No questions asked. It's great. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. It's an offer just for you, the listener of this podcast. That's betterhelp.com/Ray. And so, like you said, your introduction to, punk and hardcore, Sibling, obviously that's like a very, good rite of passage, because they'll be able to curate some of your experience, but then also you just start to pick up on stuff on your own and everything like that. Considering the fact that both you and your brother were getting into this, how did your parents react to you guys being into this stuff that was left of center? Were they, clearly they were permissive enough to let you go to shows and everything, but
yeah,
were they like, oh, it's Steve, what are you getting into, man?
Nah, you know what? It's because my brother used to take me to shows, and I was a little kid, and we're talking like 6, 7 years old, and Scared Straight their rehearsal spot was across the street at his parents' house. And I literally used to just walk across the street as an 8, 9-year-old and go watch Scared Straight perform. And like, when I look back at that and I think how lucky I was, and I'm just sitting there watching it, and I would go watch them play shows, and I can't even tell you the bands I saw, because there was so many, and his friends that would come over. I can't even tell you. I probably, saw Aggression and RKL and all of those bands just play just by virtue of the fact that I was in such close proximity to Scared Straight and being able to go see it. But yeah, like what that intro in, with that, and my parents, I think once they found out that there was no drinking and no drugs, they were kind of like, well, we did something right. So they kind of just gave us the pass to go do it. And I remember being 12, 13 after Scared Straight had kind of dissolved and became 10-Foot Pole, which was, obviously they went on to have their own success as well. And I was 14 years old being driven to, out to LA to go watch shows. And my parents never really stopped. They they encouraged it. So I was lucky in that regard too.
That's awesome. And I love that sentiment of when parents understand the concept of just like, okay, you're going to a place where no one is going to be drinking, or, you know, it's a safe-ish environment where, and
Yeah.
you're given that latitude of like, all right, well, there's nothing, you know, I mean, yes, like we might be doing stuff that you parent don't understand, but you'll at least know that we'll be relatively safe.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, right? I mean, you grew up during the same time, and it certainly had its danger to it. And like if I'm being honest, I was kind of drawn to a little bit of that danger.
Yep.
And I definitely bought into like I liked it. It seemed exciting, and it seemed dangerous, and especially at such a young age where you're kind of cutting your teeth and finding your way in the world. But I was all in. The message, the ethos, the what it meant to bands and people. I was all in, and so like my parents saw that, and I think that they kind of didn't maybe understand like the music. I know that they would always say, they're just screaming, but I think my parents kind of understood that it meant a little bit more to me in that regard. And when we started our bands, my dad took me out to go buy our first PA, bought me my first guitar. So definitely supportive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And your first kind of band experiences, because I know, I mean, Spark of Life clearly wasn't like your first band, or maybe that was your first band that like actually got out and toured and stuff like that. Did you do anything prior to that?
Yeah, everybody's in a high school hardcore band, right?
Of course.
Yeah, I was in a really bad high school hardcore band called and my brother named it after a TV show called One Atom 12, which is
okay. Yeah. That's like random, because normally I always, my favorite thing about people's first band names is like usually you can identify what the sound is from a mile away, but hearing that, I would not be able to tell what you sounded like. That's
yeah.
Good.
Because we had come up with the band and like we were playing, and just a bunch of punk skater, like hardcore kids. I mean, we were young. And I asked my brother, I was like, what should we name our band? And he's like, there was a TV show from the 60s, called One Atom 12. And we just was like, all right, we're called One Atom 12, and we went and played, parties around, and basically just played for our friends. But if at the time, like we really thought we were probably like Indian Summer meets like Angel Hair ish.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, we very slow, sort of like very slow parts. It wasn't fast at all. Very just like heavy, drony, but screamed. But we all had such terrible timing. So it was, it was such terrible timing. But that's probably who we thought we were, or were trying to be at that time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, that's cool. And when you were, like actively going to shows, and obviously, like you said, just very drawn into the scene and stuff like that, was there, I know, I mean, like you said, you eventually ended up, working in the music industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was Velvet Hammer, right?
Yeah, that is where I work.
Yeah.
That's wow. Yeah. Good on. I don't know how you know that, but that is amazing. Yes. Is where I work.
I sort of deduced some of it based around the fact that, like, you're tight with the Rise Against guys, and, I know they were a part of that at one point, but yes. Regardless, yeah. Was there a life path in regards to, like, you wanted to work in the music industry, or what was kind of, your aspiration as you started to, go through high school and maybe go to college or whatever?
Well, I knew that I had to go to college, to kind of appease my parents. That was kind of the deal, in a way. My parents were like, hey, look, we're going to support, they're like, for sure, you're going to be a rock star and you're going to make $1 million. And of course you're going to make it in skateboarding, but just in case you don't, they're like, you have to go to school. And so that was kind of the deal, is you have to continue to go to college, and we'll continue to allow you to, live here and, go on tour and play, punk shows and try to, pursue that. I never had a plan, to get into the business side of music. What ultimately actually happened is we became friends with a lot of bands whose stars continued to rise, I guess, Rise Against being definitely one of them. They took us on tour when our record first came out. And I became really good friends with Tim and Joe and like the rest of the band. And they had management at the time, and management meant nothing to me or us.
Right.
Like didn't even know what that meant. They were on Fat Records. We were signed to a subsidiary of Fat, which was this a label called Lorelei, which was run by Russ Rankin from Good Riddance and this guy Joe Clements from Fury 66. And we had no idea, it didn't even register. But after we went on tour with them, I kind of could see the light before the day with them. I was like, these guys are going to make it. Like I knew from the first time I saw them play. I had no idea who they were. And I got a call from a booking agent that booked them, but also booked Pulley, and I had become friends with her. And that's a funny story if you want to get into that. But basically we went out, and I just knew right away that this band was going to make it. I could see the talent. And so I just attached my wagon to them and started talking to their manager. And when we came home with, no money essentially from tour, right? Breaking even, I just said, what do I have to do to get an internship? And their manager at the time, her name is Missy Worth, and like just a dear woman. I wish I kept more in contact with her. She took me aside and she was like, I'll get you an internship here. And that kind of started it, kicked it off. And she brought me in, and I worked my way up from an intern to, doing day to day on Deftones and System of a Down. It's kind of a weird story, but that is definitely how it started. But no idea, just realized I needed to make money at some point. I needed to make a living.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely, I think most people, especially because, yes, independent music started to, become more of a quantifiable commodity in the early 90s with grunge exploding and everything. But still, within the context of punk and hardcore, it wasn't until those early 2000s where some bands started, like you said, see that light at the end of the tunnel where it's like, oh, we can take this more seriously, whatever that may mean. But it's still like there was no roadmap. It was still just like completely pulling it together.
Yeah, it was the Wild West. I distinctly remember, and I had the thought in my head too as I saw the roadmap sort of start to come into focus. You're watching those bands kind of play, like you're watching, Rise Against kind of like take off, and then you're seeing, all those Fat Records bands. Those guys had just tremendous runs. Looking back at it, at the time, I can't say that it really meant a lot to me because, the Fat Records sort of catalog wasn't my forte, so to speak. And neither was Epitaph, but those labels, like I was watching those bands just kind of blow up. I don't know another word to say. They weren't, becoming Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones, but they were making livings. And I was friends with a lot of those guys, and I was like, man, maybe we can do this. I quickly realized that we were probably not good enough to, which is why I ultimately, started seeking out, the business side. Cause I was like, well, if I can't make it on talent and songs, then I want to be around this music as much as I can. And so that really was when I started leaning in towards the business side.
Right. That makes sense. And with the idea of like partnering with Lorelei, like, I definitely remember the label because at that time, I started to work at a record label myself and just was, paying attention to everything that was happening in regards to that. When you started to, like go out and tour, were your expectations like met in regards to like, oh, this is what I thought tour was going to be like, and this is what it actually is? Or was it the complete antithesis of any image you had in your brain of what touring looked like?
No, it was everything that I wanted it to be. Funny part about that is because I was friends with Scott and a bunch of those bands so early on. I used to go out and sell merch for Pulley and
Amazing.
and I was a kid, and I remember, they used to take me out to, so I mean, I was 14, 15 years old, and I'm selling t-shirts at shows, and, out in the living room and in Goleta and just kind of traveling around, like I was still in school, but they would invite me out, cause they knew how much I loved it. And, ultimately that's how they found out that I was even in a band. We were driving, I was selling merch for Pulley. And I would sit up front and talk with Scott while the rest of the band kind of was sleeping in the back. And I just casually mentioned, I was like, man, I haven't told you. I go, but I started a band. And he was like, what you're in a fucking band? And like, he literally, he took us to the studio the first time and recorded us. He paid for the recording. Songs didn't hear him, he's like, let's go in, and so that was my experience with that. And like when we finally had the chance to go on the road, I was chomping at the bit because I saw how much fun Pulley was having, and and I was having fun selling merch, you know what I mean? Like if I could be part of the show, like it was all I wanted to do. And I had already had a taste of it, and it was. Is it hard? Yeah. Is it Is it always fun? I only remember the good parts, but yeah, man, we had a blast. Loved it.
Right, that's incredible. And when you started to play these shows that were, I mean, like you said, Rise Against took you out in your first tour, and I know at that time they were not. They were probably playing like 800 to 1,000 cap rooms, I'm guessing, or maybe a little bit less.
No, not even close. What's
okay? They were like Chain Reaction style.
Yeah, what's funny about that is, and I hope that Tim listens to this, but when I met Tim, the singer from Rise Against, we played a show, and our first show that we played was at a women's shelter in Ojai.
Oh, sure. Was it the women's club, like on Main Street in Ojai?
You know what? I don't know. Women. I think it was a women's shelter in Ojai. I say that I remember exactly what it was. I don't remember the name, but that was the first show of the tour. And we were out with Throwdown and Reach the Sky. And, we sat outside, because Rise Against played, and we outdrew them. I mean, that was kind of our hometown, right? Like we're still in Ventura County, and they had come all the way from Chicago. And that's when I said I knew. I heard him play a song called Ever Changing, and I hadn't no exposure to them other than I was sent an advanced CD by their booking agent. Other than that, I had no idea who they were. And I watched them play, and I think we became such quick friends because we kind of fell into the same category. We were hardcore kids, but they weren't hard enough for the hardcore kids, but they were too heavy for like the sort of like pop punk kids. And so we really connected over that. And I remember telling him, he was talking about, quitting the band and going back to school. And I just remember telling him like, man, this is it. Like people don't get it yet, but they're going to get it. And it was only a couple years after that, that they kind of took off, and it was in another stratosphere. But those first tours were actually pretty small, probably 150, 200 people.
Okay, yeah. I definitely remember seeing Rise Against play here in Southern California at Chain Reaction. I can't remember who they were on tour with, but it was definitely, I mean, it was the long hair Tim era.
Oh yeah.
I know a short-lived era, but
it's a good look.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Where it's like, like the amount of comparisons that people threw at Tim looking like Jesus were, that's probably the reason why he cut his hair. Cause it was like just that perfect length where it's like, this guy kind of looks like, the artist's depiction of Jesus.
Yeah. There he was.
Yeah, exactly. But then I definitely remember where it's like people, whatever that bill that they played, like there was, people didn't know what to do with it, where it was like we understand where you're coming from. And at that time too. It was like, oh, dude, X88 Fingers Louie, like that's the draw, not right.
That is the draw. Yeah, 100%. And it was the draw for us too. We were like, oh man, this is Joe from 88 Fingers.
Really?
Like that was 100%. But yeah, it did not take them long because I remember the first show that I saw them play their first encore, which was in a place called Soma, which is down in San Diego, in a big room. And I saw them play their first encore. They walked off the stage and people were cheering for them to a point that they were like, wait, what do we do here? And I'm like, shit, man, I think you guys go back up on stage and play, So like, yeah,
Right.
definitely cool. A bunch of cool dudes, but they definitely gave us our break and been nothing but class acts to us forever.
Yeah, and consistently. I just love the fact that it's like you can look at certain people where it's like, yes, like certain things change in people's lives, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, you're still straight edge and vegetarian and vegan, and it's like, oh yeah, these are all it all tracks. Like they all.
Oh yeah,
that.
Great dudes, like unbelievable, like great band, but even better people and friends. I mean, I don't know what else I could possibly say about them, but that's a fact.
Our friends at evilgreed.net are the place that you need to visit in order to buy vinyl, band merch. We're talking sweaters, sweatshirts, long sleeves. The thing about Evil Greed is that they act like a record label because they have a curated list of bands and labels that they work with. They're not just casting out the widest net and being like, everybody open a web store with us. Come on and party. They're like, hey, are you heavy? Do you got something that's affiliated with, punk, hardcore, or metal? All right, check. Then, do we define this as something that, is akin to what it is that we're already doing? Check. Then boom, you're let in. Like, let me give you a sample of some of the bands that they work with. Gel, Blood Incantation, Holder, Pain of Truth, Hot Water Music. And they also work with a ton of record labels like Sargent House, End Hits Records, Triple B. Like, trust me in saying that if you listen to this podcast, you will find something to buy from them. They're based in Berlin, Germany, but they ship worldwide. And what that means is that you in the United States, I know it may be scary to be like, oh my gosh, I'm ordering internationally all the way from Germany. The shipping rates are very advantageous for us. So hop on it and you will be able to save some dough. So go to evilgreed.net, shop to your heart's content, and then get all those things shipped to you at once. So you're not just buying from like 17 band stores or label stores. It's all in one spot and they ship it to you lickety split. I mean, I've ordered from them before. I've gotten an order here in California in like 7 to 8 days. So trust me in saying you will be well taken care of. evilgreed.net. Visit the site and enjoy.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code CHAMPION and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matter more than ever. Remember to use code CHAMPION and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, and parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, Virginia only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Promotional offer not available in Washington, D.C.
As you started to experience kind of all sides of, the music business, as it were, from playing and then, like you said, kind of behind the scenes stuff and working with the management side of stuff, did you, I guess, enjoy the business aspects of your band in regards to, like, I mean, when I say business, it's like, working on the record deal and, settling at shows and stuff like that. Was that the role you filled in the band, or was that just something that, kind of fell on your shoulders because you're the singer?
You know what? Naturally, it came very natural to me. And to be honest, like it happened more because I felt like I was the weakest link in the band. Our drummer was classically, jazz trained musician, and I can't read music. I can barely play it, like singing. I felt like I was the weak link, and I felt like my role in the band when it started was and now we call it management, right? But like back then it was, hey, I'll be the one who like sets up the shows. I'll handle, dealing with promoters and dealing with venues, and I'll settle up at the end of the night. And I took on that role, but I had no idea that it was called, managing a band or tour managing or anything like that. Ultimately, I'd ended up becoming that, and I was very fortunate to be able to go tour manage some other bands because of that experience. But yeah, I really didn't know that that's what it was, and I do the same thing to this day. Like I'm the band's manager. If we have one, like I try to take on that role still, because it just kind of came naturally to me, and I just kind of take over those duties.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you started to, get more enmeshed and immersed within the music industry, and clearly your passion for, punk and hardcore was clearly still there. And like, was there, that itch for you to, be on stage? Like, do you feel comfortable on stage? Like, because there is that sort of push and pull when people, get up there and they like the idea of playing in a band, but then once they do, it's kind of like, oh, I like all the aspects of, playing in a band except this. Like, I don't like recording, or I don't like playing on stage. Like, do you like all the aspects of it, or do you like, certain things more than others?
I think there's certain, I'm human, right? Like, so I would say that there's some things that aren't, I can't say that I dislike any of it. I love being on stage and performing, but not because it's, hey, everybody look at me sort of thing. It's like, I've always felt like I have, something that I want to say, or there's something creative, there's a story behind. I'm a very lyrics driven guy. Obviously I write all of them. And so I always feel like I have something to give with that. And at the end of the day, like, all I ever really wanted to do with performing was give back to this scene and this music, all of the things that I took. And I always just felt like I was just like a part of the community. I never wanted to stand out or have it be about me or about Spark of Life or about, what we were doing necessarily. I just wanted to be part of what was happening. And I still do. Like, and that really is kind of the driving force behind it. Like, the recording side of it is probably, but it has its positives too. But recording is probably the hardest part, because it has to be perfect and it has to sound good. And, everything is recorded so well now, and every mistake is heard. So it's that part of it doesn't necessarily attract me that much, but just being part of playing live and being part of the community, I think that's what really drives, at least me. I can't speak for everybody in the band, but definitely a driving force for me.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I like just harkening back to what you were saying earlier, where you're like, dude, I'm the weakest link in the band. And you're like, wait, I got to record that? I'm like, I could barely do what I do.
Yeah, it's the worst, man. You should see me in the recording studio. I'm like, everybody turn off the lights. Nobody look at me. It's, I feel like I've gotten better at it, like over time. Like, I feel like I'm probably the best I've ever been right now, and that's just from listening to enough music and being in the studio long enough and with people who are much, much better than me at it, and just kind of like mimicking what they do. But, yeah, I definitely have always felt like the weakest link. They'll say, "Oh, we're playing whatever chord they're playing," and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. You're like, that's cool. Well, I'm going to go yell into a microphone and try to hold a note at some point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Considering, since you have played shows like literally in, different eras, early 2000s to, early 2020s, or it's a whole different ball game. Do you notice like the differences? How does it feel playing now, besides the fact, I mean, you could easily make the joke of like, oh yeah, my body parts ache and whatever. Like, we'll take that off the table. We don't need to make that joke. But, so like, what do you notice about, the way that, the types of shows you play now versus the types of shows you played back then, and like sort of the comparison and contrasting between those two eras?
I think that's a good question. I think back then, I got to say that I didn't care as much, meaning, I didn't care what people thought of us. I didn't care. I just wanted to be there, and I just wanted to be part of it. And I felt like I was part of it. So it didn't like really, I can't say that I paid attention enough I'm not sure how to say it. Like we were all together. It was all peers. Now, when we go play shows, like obviously, the encouraging part of it, and like the part that I really, really enjoyed about being back on the road, is we will go play shows with people that are half our age. And I worried about that originally. Like, man, are they going to like us? What are they going to think? It concerned me, certainly. Like when we went out on our first tour, I was like, I wonder what these people are going to think. And, just some of the young bands that played. There's this band in San Diego that we played with at Che, called Pacemaker, and they're kids. They're not signed. They don't have, they have a couple demos out, and they absolutely killed it. It was the exact kind of music that I would have been playing when I was their age. Like it just took me back to old times. And like, really, I was just so grateful for the experience, because I was like, there are kids that are still doing this thing, and it still means so much to them, that I was right back in. I was all in again, and I went up on stage, and like we played, and it went super well. And I can say that it felt the same, because the community just didn't seem to have gone anywhere. It was like, it just picked up right where it left off. And like, at least that's how it felt to me. I'm sure people have different experiences. But it just felt so natural. It felt welcoming. It felt like there was unity. It felt like there was a community there. And I can't say that it felt any different, because it felt the same way when we were doing it 20 years ago.
That's really, I love that idea of being, especially now where the music scene has had time to incubate even more than it has. Cause whatever, in the 90s, like punk and hardcore, broadly speaking, was still relatively young, like, maybe 20 years old, arguably 30. And now the fact that you have so many different generations getting into it, and the accessibility of it, you yourself as, an old human being compared to someone who's, 19 years old, you can still receive that energy from them and be like, oh yes, like even though it may sound a little different or, look a little different, I can still see the thing that attracted me to this, youth movement in the first place. And I don't need to like, just, say this is a kid thing and move on with my life.
Oh yeah. It was the most exciting part of it. I like I said, that is to me, like, it's really what gets me excited about what we're doing, and like why, I'm just so excited to like move forward with it, because the kids out there that are doing it, like, everybody says, it used to be different back in our day. And it probably was, like, I guess we could sit and dissect that forever, but just the thought that I watched these bands play, and there's more of them that I can't remember the names of that we've played with now, but just the energy and with the passion that they played, I was like, the kids are fine. This music is fine. It's in good hands. I'm sure there's gonna be people who hate me saying that, but like the music and people care about it. Kids still care about it. There are pockets that exist in hardcore that really, really care about hardcore. And I thought that was just so encouraging, to see, and now to be a part of it again and to kind of witness it, and just, man, it was an honor to even play with them. And I told them that after the show. I said, thanks for letting us play with you. And they're like, thanks for letting us play with you. Holy crap, you were in this band and and all I can think is I'm just grateful because, like I said, I'm a fan long before I'm a musician. I just, this music just means so much. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, yo, I'm drafting off of you guys. Like, I'm the old man in this room. You guys got a good, 20 years. Like, I can't play when I'm 60 or whatever.
Yep. It's true.
A few things I also want to hit on. I mean, no one can obviously look at the band and say like, oh, that's cool. Fred Armisen has played drums on a song and like did a video with you and stuff like that. And I mean, anybody that has ever paid attention to Fred Armisen understands his connection to independent music and punk and hardcore. The dude is obviously a true head. So, I mean, considering his history, and considering your obvious friendship with him, I'm sure it was an easy ask. It was just a matter of like, all right, well, like, what's your availability? When can you get out here? And that sort of stuff. Was that more of the, I guess, consideration set rather than like, all right, I got to like, really have this well-crafted text to throw over to him or whatever.
Yeah, no, Fred's awesome. So, I mean, it's a quick backstory on that is, my wife used to manage a band called That Dog.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. And they were playing a show and, Fred is friends with them. And I was standing at the show and I was just minding my own business. And I was wearing a government issue shirt. And Fred came up to me and he's like, basically, he goes, I know those guys. And I was like, huh? Like, what? And he's like, I know those guys, your shirt. And I said, oh, that's wow, cool. He's like, oh, and I'm from, he told me he's from Chicago. And I had absolutely no idea who he was. Not a clue who he was. Right. And the show goes on and we're talking and then we start talking about hardcore and like he can talk about music and like his knowledge of punk and is second to none, truly. But as the night went on, we just exchanged numbers. I had absolutely no idea who he was. So the night ends and I was just like, he just seemed like a cool guy. And I went and saw Jawbox like during their reunion. However many years ago that was, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. He took me to the show. I took him to go see Gorilla Biscuits and like, we just started hanging out until ultimately my wife goes, that he's famous, right? That he's, he's done all, and she finally pulled stuff up for me. And I was like, holy crap. I had absolutely no idea. And then we became friends. And like I said, I had been writing songs. He actually played on a song with my daughter. That's really where it started. I hit him up. I had written this song in my garage. I had all the guitar parts and I said, hey, will you come play drums? I know you're a drummer. Will you come play drum? At that point, I knew who he was and he was in Trenchmouth. And then by then I knew. And he came and played on my daughter's song. And like, that was kind of the start of it. And then I wrote Song of Hope in my garage and I just sent the text, said, hey man, I'm writing this song, wondering if you'll come play on it. And he said, yep. And that was literally it. 2 days later we were in a studio and we were recording it.
That's literally like one of the most charming stories I've ever heard because it not only does it pull together the connective tissue of what, I mean, for him to go out of his way to be like recognizing a shirt and then commenting on it and then having the organic friendship come about as opposed to the, predatory relationship that can sometimes happen where people are like, oh, what could you do for me? And it's like, every aspect of that is beautiful. And I'm glad we have that story. Documented. He's an amazing guy. And like I said, he came out of nowhere. He was very friendly. I knew he was friends with That Dog, right. Jack Black was there too. He was standing 2 feet away from us, so I had no idea who he was, but what a great dude. Like, and like, it's so funny because every time I hit him up, like, hey, he's like, hell yeah, I'll come drum. Like, and it's really cool because we're finishing up our full length right now,
so hopefully be out soon. But we're gonna cover That Dog song, and he's gonna come play drums on it on the full length. So it's gonna come full circle.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. That's so cool. And two last things I want to hit on was the idea, like, correct me if I'm wrong, I presume you're straight edge still, or still claim that, or is that not? Okay.
Yep. Nope. 100%.
And obviously being a straight edge adult is a funny thing, because most people, like, you just say like, oh, I don't drink. But obviously I'm putting myself in that batch with you of trying to explain what straight edge is, and then having that mental calculation of like, do I just say I don't drink and whatever? So like, how does straight edge kind of like apply to your life now? Or is it just one of those things you're like, for most average people, you're just like, yeah, I just don't drink?
Yeah, I think it depends on the crowd. I think it depends. My friends know I'm straight edge, and our entire band, nobody drinks or does drugs or anything. So in terms of that, it's always been easy. We've never been a straight edge band, per se, because everybody wanted to like kind of steer clear of that. But I still put X's on my hands from time to time just to rile people up. But
just to feel alive.
Yeah, just to kind of do it and kind of like see what, like what kind of reaction I can get at, playing at a show where clearly we're probably the only ones. I probably tend to steer more towards, I just don't drink it, as opposed to the explanation anymore. Cause not that I don't want to give the explanation, but the 40-year-old people at dinner parties don't really give a shit that I'm straight edge.
Right. So, like, guys, let me walk you through the history of what this is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It started here. Yeah. So at this point, I definitely defer more towards just the explanation, or the quick I don't drink, but it still means the world to me inside. Like it's never lost its luster with me. I know what it means, inside of me, and it's forever special to me.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that. I mean, there are a few of us that still, proudly apply the label once they have grown into being an adult. So it's always, few and far between where you're like, oh yes, like I like that.
I will take the opportunity though. If the opportunity presents itself, I will take that opportunity to, to tell people about it, because it does mean that much to me. But for the most part, probably not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're like, when I can lean into it, I can. And I'm sure too, you've had this experience where you mention that word and it can mean, people's entry point to straight edge now is not, Minor Threat or Earth Crisis. They're like, oh dude, I saw it on CM Punk or Davey Havoc from AFI. And it's like, oh, that's your starting point. And that's equally as cool. It's just a different experience than mine.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I think Minor Threat probably reaches across everything, I would say, probably. But yeah, I mean, that's probably not the first band that somebody's hearing anymore. I actually hadn't really even thought of that, but it's probably not the first band that a straight edge kid hears anymore. Yeah.
It's or just like the exposure. It's because, I mean, a lot of people I know, just like your average civilian, quote unquote, like they'll at least have heard of that term, whether or not it's been thrown around. Like, people can mention it in pop culture or whatever. But the fact that that movement is permeated so much to where people like literally may never have even heard of Minor Threat. They're just like, oh yeah, I saw the wrestler CM Punk and like straight edge means that, and he explains it to me on TV, and now I'm straight edge. And it's like, that's unbelievwith. Like,
hey, and you know what? If that's what it takes to get a kid to back it, and then now with the internet, I mean, man, you can find anything, right? But like, if that's what it takes, hey, I don't care. That's cool. I think that's cool. Yeah.
Totally, because it obviously has to permeate in different forms for it to have meaning to people who are, obviously arguably younger, because there is that notion that if you don't have something that is a touch point that you can like go witness in some capacity, it makes it more removed from you, And so,
and for being, I never saw Minor Threat.
Yeah.
I never witnessed Minor Threat play a song, like, so my exposure
Yep.
with somebody handing that down, now it wasn't that far removed, probably, in terms of time, but yeah, I think that anybody that can make that connection into this music, and whatever that entry point is like, man, it's special. Like, I love being in those walls of that community. Straight edge punk, like, I mean, there was a time I was a little bit more militant about the straight edge side of it, but just the fact of being part of that community, whatever that entry point is into getting into that, like, man, I wish that for everybody, to feel that whatever that is. I wish that for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. And the last thing I'll hit on was the because you worked in the music industry and you worked with a lot of different shapes and sizes of bands. Was there something that was surprising to you as you started to navigate the music business? Whether it was like, oh, this is the way that the business does, this is like what a green room looks like at a late night show or whatever. Was there? I'm sure there's a lot of things, but what are some things that surprised you once you started to see how the business of music gets put together?
I mean, if I'm being honest, and not to give away industry secrets here,
Yes, it's okay. We're in a safe space.
I was blown away at the amount of money that it gets involved, and how little it actually has to do with the music. It's sort of depressing. Like, looking back on it, like, it's, the music was almost secondary. It was, everything was calculated. There was nothing really organic, other than the fact that the bands probably started in a garage. And I am 100% positive that System of a Down started in a garage, and like, but beyond, once you get past that, managers and the industry, everything is calculated. There's really not a lot left to chance. And not doesn't mean that everything works, because that's, that isn't the case either. I watched bands get, chewed up and spit out, but watching just the, where people think that, it's, oh, look at this cool thing that this band is doing, but like, they don't know that for 3 months I thought about that idea and manufactured it. And saw that plan through, to a level of, and once you have the resources and the money to be able to like see those plans through, it's just, anything is possible. And in a way, like, it's sort of cool, but at the same time, it's so counterintuitive to the things that we love about music. And I had a really hard time with that, actually, working in music, because it felt like none of this is real. Even though I know the bands were real, like, I love Deftones, nicest guys ever, like,
Yep.
And working with them was amazing. And like, and same with System, like, truly, they were very nice guys. Cypress Hill, fuck, those guys were nice guys, but nothing is left to chance. There really isn't any, it's very calculated. So the amount of money that goes into it, and that side of it was very surprising. But
yeah, no, it's a valid point, and especially when you look at what it takes to, like you said, put things together, whether it's something that's relatively straightforward and simple as like a recording budget, how $500,000 needs to get divided between all of these different parties, and we got a mixing guy and a mastering guy, and then it's like, well, the band needs the lodging, and that comes out of this, and yeah, you just start to be like, oh wow, like, this, to your point, like, nothing can be left up to chance, because like, otherwise, things fall apart very quickly if that's not buttoned up.
Yeah, and you can't, and at the end of the day, if you are one of those bands that is headlining an arena, and there's an expectation of what that means, and as a fan, and I'm not even mad about it, if I'm sure that's unpunk to say too, but it's not my style, but like, I'm not even mad about it, because it is the nature of what it is. And if this is the music that people want to hear and they are willing to go out and they're passionate about it, I don't care what band you're passionate about. That's not for me to decide. Music is up to, it's discretionary, and people can make their own ideas and opinions about. I haven't always thought this, mind you, Ray. I used to definitely buy into the sellout side of it and all of that, but now it's my daughter loves Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo. And I'm inundated with it because, it's what my daughter listens when we hop in the car and she sings along, and,
Of course.
and I'm not even mad because my daughter believes in those songs. She's a tween and turning into a teenager, and she believes in those songs. And if that's her passion is, and that gets her through the hard times or the tough days or, whatever is going on in her little life, who am I to say, what that means. So
Yep.
I'm not mad about any of it, but I definitely think that the money, the amount that goes into it and the production side of it is overwhelming and astounding to watch.
Yeah. Yep. No, I totally get that. Well, yeah, thank you for being honest about that. But yeah, I appreciate you hanging out and letting me ping pong around your brain about all of these things that we care so deeply about. So yeah, I'm excited for what you got coming up.
Awesome, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
That is What's Up with Steve. Hopefully you found that, like I said, just engaging and then hopefully inspirational, because you never know where your creative muse may take you. It could maybe, stay dormant for a couple years because, we're all busy. We got multiple things going on. But the fact that, Steve obviously still feels connected to punk and hardcore, and the fact that this band can now exist in the year 2024 when really, from all stretch of the imagination, doesn't need to, but it does. Let's be honest, it does. So thank you very much to Steve, and thank you very much to Mike Hartsfield at New Age Records for bringing us together. Love when friends recommend friends for the show. Next week, I have a great discussion with the vocalist of the modern hardcore band called Spaced, who's releasing a record on Revelation Records in, I want to say, March. We're talking like a couple weeks now. But the vocalist Lexi Reingout, I'm fairly certain I'm getting that pronunciation. I mean, even if I don't, then, she'll politely correct me at some point in the future. But yeah, that's what we got next week. Lexi Reingout from Spaced. Until then, please be safe, everybody. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that no matter who you are, mental health challenges can affect you, and how you manage them can make all of the difference. That's why everyone should have access to mental health support that meets them where they are and helps them get through. BetterHelp provides online therapy on your schedule. It's flexible, simple to use, and more affordable than in-person therapy. Connect with a licensed therapist selected just for you. Learn more at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
This is Tracy V. Wilson from Stuff You Missed in History class. The national sales event is on at your Toyota dealer, making now the perfect time to get a great deal on a dependable new car. Like a legendary Camry built for performance and available with all-wheel drive, you can count on your new Camry to get anywhere you need to go. Or check out an affordable and reliable Corolla with a trim for every lifestyle. From the hip sedan to the sporty hatchback, there's a Corolla built just for you. Check out more national sales event deals when you visit buyatoyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
Did you know that most salads travel over 2,000 miles to reach your plate? But not with 80 Acres Farms. Their crisp salad greens and herbs are food less traveled, going from farm to store in days, not weeks. They stay fresher for longer in your fridge. My salad lasts all week long, which means less food waste and easy meal planning. Oh, and did I mention there's no need to wash these greens? Because 80 Acres Farms uses 0 pesticides. Visit 80acresfarms.com to learn more and find their salads and salad kits at your local Harris Teeter.